What is up, book nerds? I am Rachel Bateman and NaNoWriMo is just around the corner, so I wanted to pop on and do a video about my essential tools for a successful NaNoWriMo and give you a little bit of insight about my NaNoWriMo 2020 novel. So I'm going to jump right in with the tools that I use every time I'm drafting a book, and they are so helpful to me. So my first tool, and the most important one, is my AlphaSmart Neo 2. There are a lot of different AlphaSmart models, and really any of them work. I particularly like the Neo 2 because I like the feel of the keyboard on it. I used to have a 3000 and the keys were too stiff and they made my fingers hurt. And AlphaSmart is such a great tool for something like NaNoWriMo because it forces you to just keep moving. This screen is tiny. You could get 1, 2, 3. I have 4 lines of text here. And that's not enough to go back and edit as I'm writing, so I just keep going on. It's completely distraction free, there's no internet, and it is super portable. I have had this one since NaNoWriMo 2014, and I just changed the AA batteries for the first time in all of that time. So it really, the batteries last forever, it has great battery life, it is super portable and rugged. That said, I finally did just buy a fun padded case for my AlphaSmart because after having it 6 years, I thought, well, what if I break this thing? They don't even make them anymore, and you can get them on eBay for reasonable prices, and I might actually order a backup just in case. But I finally just decided to buy something to protect it, and it's pretty, and I like pretty things. So there's that. My second thing that I need for a successful NaNoWriMo is my outline. I outline all my books in a ridiculous plotting workbook. It's super long, super detailed. I'll probably deviate from it, but knowing where my book is going is hugely important to my success in NaNoWriMo. So I still have a few things I need to figure out before November, but it is coming along nicely. My third thing that I need, you've seen flashes of them already, are compression gloves. I have tendonitis in my wrists, and it has started to get worse this year. I actually, several years ago in, 2012 or 2013, taught myself to type in Dvorak keyboard layout instead of QWERTY. Your fingers move a lot less in Dvorak when you're writing in English, and that is much nicer on your hands and wrists. And my tendonitis problems have been significantly better since then. However, I do run a small business now, and that involves jarring up a lot of bath and body products. So there's a lot of twisting and jarring and twisting, and it has irritated my tendonitis, my wrists. So they're already bothering me, and I do not want to jump into 50,000 words of writing in a month when they're bothering me. So I got these compression gloves. They're actually made for arthritis, but they work for things like tendonitis and carpal tunnel. So if your hands and wrists start to hurt or ache when you are doing a lot more typing and writing than normal, try something like this. These were like $10 on Amazon, I think. You could get fancy pants ones that have like copper throughout them, though there have been no studies to show that the copper actually improves the pain. So I wouldn't spend the extra money on that. This is definitely something to have. I tend to write in November in fingerless gloves anyway because my hands get cold, and I live in Montana and it's cold here. These ones have that nice compression to help with my joint pain. So I have been wearing them a lot more than I typically would because I'm trying to get used to them because my normal fingerless gloves don't have any like finger situation. They're just straight across. So I've been wearing these just while I'm doing things to get used to having things between my fingers while I work and write. And I have noticed an improvement, and they're purple and they're cute, and that is always a bonus. And my final thing that I need for a successful NaNoWriMo, because I'm really a simple writer and I don't need a lot, is my Bubbly by drink. I try not to drink a lot of sugar, and I try not to drink a lot of diet soda, though I have been known to love a Diet Cherry Coke. And you know, Diet Coke used to have those fun flavors, like the acai blueberry and the lime and all that. Man, I loved those. I started drinking those last NaNoWriMo and I loved them. And then they're like, let's do Coke Energy instead. And it just... But this gives me the yummy taste and the bubbles without all the sugar and without all the caffeine, because I am highly sensitive to caffeine, and so sometimes it gets a little scary when I drink soda. So that is really all I need for a successful novel writing experience in November. I have seen so many NaNoWriMo survival kits and packs that involve so many things, and if that works for you, that is fabulous. But for me, keeping it simple is better. The fewer things I need that I am relying upon when I write, the better, because that way if I forget something or something's not working, it doesn't matter. So I have my basics of what I need. Now, I'm going to jump in and do the author work in progress tag. I actually did one of these several months ago for a different work in progress, but I figure since we're all talking about our NaNoWriMo books and what's coming up, I would go ahead and do another one for this book to give you an idea of what I'm working on next month. So the first question in this work in progress tag is, what is the working title of my book? Now, I've already flashed this at you once, I've talked about it before, but my working title is The Creek Between. This title I actually have to credit my best friend Amy for. I was really struggling with the title, and I was telling her, you know, the creek in between their houses is a big deal. It's a big part of the book. And she said, well, The Creek Between. I was like, oh, right, okay, that's it. And that became my title, and it's really worked for me. And actually, as soon as she sent me that text, like, I had this flash of inspiration of a very quick scene between my two main characters that plays into that. So it's perfect. I have a strange hair. Where did the idea for your book come from? So, story time. A couple months ago, I was going out to write. I was working on a synopsis to send to my publisher, and I was driving out to this area that I like to write. It's like a half an hour from town. And I was thinking randomly, and I don't know why it popped in my head, but Amy, who I just mentioned, titled my book, her family owns 2 houses in North Carolina. They are next door to each other. But the county line runs in between the 2 houses. So pizza delivery will deliver to one of the houses, but not the other one, even though they are legitimately 100 yards apart. They are right there, but they will only go as far as this particular house. And I was thinking about that for whatever reason, and this random scenario popped in my head of a guy who is past the delivery line, so he orders delivery to show up at his neighbor's house. And it drives her crazy that he does this. And so when I got to my writing spot that night, I set up my camp chair and I sat down and I pounded out like 5,000 words of a scene. And that's all I had, was that scenario. There was nothing else behind it. And I was like, okay, that's out of the way. It's off my mind. I could go ahead with my synopsis. And I did. I went ahead the next several days and finished my very detailed synopsis for my publisher. And I went back to planning the book I had been planning to write for NaNoWriMo, and it is one that I had been planning to write for months, since like February or March I've been outlining this book. But this idea of the pizza delivery situation just kept coming back up. So about 6 weeks ago, maybe less, I don't know, I'd have to go back and look. I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna roll with it. I'm gonna set the other book to the side, I'll come back to it later, and I'm going to figure out what the story is behind this pizza situation. I'm going to figure out who these characters are, why it drives her so crazy that he does this. And I just started rolling, and before long I had this idea for The Creek Between and this whole book. The next question is, what genre is my work in progress? This book is a small town romance, and it is an adult small town romance, which is different for me. I typically write young adult, and I have for a long, long time. And when I'm not writing young adult, I typically write things like horror or dabble in mystery and thriller. So this adult small town romance is very different for me, but I'm really enjoying it. I have been reading a ton of them, and I do find that most of them have dual points of view between the main female character and the main male character, or the 2 love interests if it's not male-female. And this will most likely be a single point of view, which is a little bit different for the genre, though not unheard of. And it might kind of dance more into the women's fiction realm because of that. But I'm really rolling with the whole small town vibe. The next question is to choose the actors for your movie version. It's funny, the last time I did this tag, I was like, I don't really do that. That's not part of my process. And then I realized it actually really is. It's weird though, because it is part of my process when I write novels, but not screenplays. And I think that's because in the novel, I describe the character, whereas in the screenplay, unless it's really pertinent to their story, they don't get an actual character description beyond the very, very basics. For novel writing though, I like to have a very vivid picture in my mind, so I do look at actors and actresses. So I've actually been spending the last couple days of my outlining coming up with who my dream cast would be if this became a movie. And so far, I have for my main character, her name is Brighton. I would love if A.D. Bryant played Brighton. I think she is absolutely fabulous. If you've not watched Shrill yet, go to Hulu and do that. So that's my main character. She has two really, really close friends in this small town. Neither of them are named yet. So that is something that needs to happen before November. One friend is actually her brother's ex-wife, and I really envision her as Hillary Burton. I love Hillary Burton. I just adore her. If you follow my Instagram, you've seen me posting about her book, and she is just the image I've had in mind for this character from the start. And then her other really close friend is a woman that she hasn't known for nearly as long. They met at a business meeting in town because this woman is getting ready to open a boutique. And she, I envision as Bree Kish. If you're not familiar with Bree Kish, she is a model. I will link her Instagram down below. She is fabulous. And I really see that character as her. My character, Brighton, is a fashion designer. And this character, this Bree Kish character, is like her muse, who she designs for. My love interest, Andrew, is Adam Brody, who... How do you not love Adam Brody? True story, I never watched The OC, I've never seen it. I'm sure I'd probably enjoy it, but I know everyone's like, oh, it's Seth Cohen, and so I don't see him as that because I've never seen him as that. But I just love him. If you've not watched Ready or Not, it's great for everything, but I really love Adam Brody in that, and he just has that look I'm going for. And his father, Rance, is a very, very important part of the backstory and the journey of this book. And Jeff Bridges is who I envision for Rance. I think he would be perfect, and I just also adore him. Now, I actually have, like, on my Pinterest board for this book, a whole bunch of other actors and actresses to populate the town and just what I'm envisioning, but those are the major players for this book. The next prompt for this tag is a one-sentence synopsis of the book. Coming up with a logline is one of my favorite parts of plotting a book. It is difficult, but once I have it nailed down, I feel like I have so much better idea of what the book is. I really struggled with the logline of this book. I wrote one down. In fact, I am going to flip through this real quick and find it. So I wrote in my little plotting notebook my logline, and this is where this started and what I wrote. A mid-30s fashion designer has to face the ghosts of her past and learn to let go in order to achieve her dreams. And then right under that, in all caps, I wrote, that is absolute crap. Like, that's where it started. I hated that logline, and I really struggled, and it took me probably another 2 or 2.5 weeks to come up with a logline I liked, but I did finally land on this one, and I feel like it really captures the essence of this book a little more. And it is, when she's threatened with the loss of her house, a 30-something fashion designer makes a deal with the devil next door, who also happens to be an old summer fling. I feel like that gives you a better idea of the genre and kind of what we're dealing with in this book. There is so much more to it, but that is just the nature of a logline. There's always going to be so much more to it. You can only figure out so much in one sentence. The next question is, will this book be self-published or represented by an agency? I will send this book to my agent and see what happens with it. I don't really have a lot of big plans for what I'd like to see. It would be a good title for something like Hallmark Publishing or Montlake or wherever, but I tend to not plan publication ahead like that. When I am working on the book to write it, I focus wholly on the writing of the book and then decide what I would like to do with it. Most of the time that means I'm going to send it to Liza, my agent, because she's fabulous, and as much as I enjoy self-publishing, I don't always have the time to dedicate to that. So partnering with a publisher through my agent is really the great way to go. But right now, I am writing this book for me because I enjoy it, and that's how I write all of my books. For me, because I enjoy them. And then I decide what to do for publishing. The next question is, how long did it take you to write the first draft of this book? I'm going to go ahead and say about a month. I'm going to write it for NaNoWriMo next month. I just went back and looked, and according to my handy dandy Instagram here, it tells me that it was November 29th of 2019 that I finished Make the Fireflies Dance, and November 29th of 2014 that I finished Someone Else's Summer. So if that's any indication, apparently it's going to take me about 29 days. I like to write fast drafts. I work better that way, so I've not written the first draft yet, obviously, but it is my NaNoWriMo book, and I don't typically write 50,000 words during November for NaNoWriMo. I write the whole book, so that's what I'm planning. If something comes up, we'll see. The next question is, what other books would you compare your story to? And here's the funny thing. So I'm not a big contemporary romance reader outside of young adult, I'm not a big small town romance reader. I never have been. This idea came into my head, and that's the genre I'm rolling with. I am not a big women's fiction reader and never have been. So I'm just reading all these books now to get a vibe and a feel for the genre I'm writing in, because this idea kind of came out of left field into this genre that I've never written and don't read a whole lot of. I do, however, watch a ton of romantic comedies and a ton of like small town feel good Hallmarky movies. And so I would compare it to a lot of those types of stories. It is playing with a lot of typical romance tropes. There is a bit of an enemies to lovers situation, as well as a second chance going on there, and a forbidden romance situation in a way that the two families really do not get along. Mostly Brighton's family kind of hates Andrew's family for a big backstory reason that will come out in the book. So I'm trying not to be like too trope heavy, but that's just kind of what naturally progressed as I was figuring these characters out. I would mostly compare it to, you know, a Hallmark movie, which a lot of people are like, ugh, they're all the same. I'm like, I don't care. I like them all. I don't care if I know that they're going to end up together in the end. I don't care if I could tell where it's going from 10 minutes into the movie, because I love them. That doesn't mean I'm trying to write like a super by the book formulaic story, but that's what I would compare it to, is a Hallmark movie. I love them and I want to write one. The next question is, who or what inspired you to write the book? I kind of told you that story on where the idea came from, what inspired it, but I think what maybe had inspired that also is that same day that I had that flash of the scenario of the pizza delivery thing, I was talking on the phone to my agent and we were chatting about another client of hers, Jen, who had just sold 2 small town romance books and how she was kind of shifting from young adult to doing that instead. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Good for her. I can't wait to read them. I think they sound great. And we were just talking. And then I had this flash of a story idea from this scenario from my past. And as I was writing, I was like, these aren't teenagers. I always write teenagers. These are adults. And it just kind of rolled from there. So I didn't set out with like, oh, I talked to Liza about another for clients writing small town romance. I want to write a small town romance now. It just kind of happened on the same day. So I think that probably somewhere subconsciously back here, these purple gloves are really distracting me. Every time they come up, I look at my little screen on my camera instead of at the lens, because they're very distracting. So sorry if they distract you. Anyway, in my subconscious somewhere, that conversation with Liza about Jen Bardsley's small town romances was probably floating around when I came up with this idea. And the last question on this tag is, what else about the book might pique the reader's interest? I honestly don't know if this will really pique anyone's interest, but I'm going to tell you anyway, especially if you listened to my last video about my bookish pet peeves. I talked a lot about how much it bothers me when people write books set in Montana when they have no idea about Montana. So, this book is set in Harper's Lake, which is a fictional small town in Montana, in the Whitefish area. Despite being a Montanan, I tend to write about the Carolinas a lot because I did live down there for a while and I love it down there. And I love the ocean, and we obviously don't have that here in Montana. But this is set in a Montana town. It is very much like a hybrid of Seeley Lake, Montana, which is one of my favorite places in the world, and Whitefish, which is one of the coolest towns in Montana, but it is a completely fictional town. So it will be a Montana book written by someone who actually knows Montana, and that probably only matters to the few of us who are driven absolutely crazy reading books about Montana. But there it is. Another thing that maybe would pique interest is that as I've been plotting this book, I've had other ideas crop up of other stories that could take place in Harper's Lake, Montana. And I'm not necessarily setting out for this to be a series or, you know, a bunch of interconnected standalones set in the same location, which, I mean, let's be honest, is really a series, but it's not a serial series. I'm not setting out for that to be the case, but I do have other ideas floating around in the background of my mind that could take place in this same town involving some of these characters that we're meeting in this book. And I really do think that's a lot of fun. We'll see where I go with that, if I do or not. Otherwise, I guess what would pique the interest if I say this is a Hallmark movie in novel form, which, I mean, Hallmark publishes novels also, so there's a lot of those, but I know that I'm not the only one that just adores those movies. I do know that a lot of people think it's weird that I adore those movies because I also really adore horror movies, but you know, we all have our depths. So that is everything you need to know about my NaNoWriMo 2020 project. I am super excited to write it. I am also super not ready to write it yet. I feel like I have the plot down pretty well and the characters definitely well enough that I could make it through. Mostly it's the rest of my life that's not ready yet. So I need to take time to get everything in order so I'm ready to jump in for NaNoWriMo next month. How are you doing with your planning and prepping for NaNoWriMo? Is your story coming together? Are you outlining it? Let me know how it's going. We're getting closer and closer and I really want to cheer you on. So if you are doing NaNoWriMo, also go ahead and drop your NaNoWriMo username in the comments. I am honestly pretty terrible about being on the NaNoWriMo site, which as an ML should not be the case, but especially this year when everything's a little bit weird, I am. But I would like to have more friends on NaNoWriMo so I can cheer you on there as well. So drop your username down below. If you like this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Go ahead and hit that bell when you do so you'll be notified of my future videos. I am Rachel Bateman and I'll see you back here next week.